right. So it'll take a little bit for some people to start coming in because they've got to see that it's there.
Yeah.
So we'll wait and hang out.
You make the introductions and enjoy yourself with your Instagram.
Right. There. Afternoon.
Let's see if we get any questions.
Yeah. We've got a few people starting to come in, but I don't know if you want to... oh, you got a hi, Elf.
Hi.
I don't know if you want to start with kind of an introduction of yourself at all, or
Sure.
go from there.
Hi, my name is Ulf Karlsson, and I'm from Sweden. And I started to train in 1984. You can say we started with the Kishimoto-di naming in roughly 2011, but we started training in 2009. We'll try to answer any questions. We already got a few, so we'll try to answer them first, maybe.
Sure. So I know one of the questions that we got was about Shinpan Shiroma, or Shiroma Shinpan, or Fusukuma. Just asking if we knew anything about the differences between what he did and Mabuni and his system of Shitoryu. So I know that's a little outside of the wheelhouse, but a little history related still.
So Shiroma Shinpan was mainly a student of Itosu Anko, but he also learned at least Sanshin. I can't remember if it was one or two more kata from Miyagi Shogun or the Higona Kanryo lineage, but at least Sanshin. And a few of his students was called Ishikawa brothers, and they have some students who still do his kind of karate, but I'm not sure how public that is, so I won't give out any names. But I've seen some video exhibition. I think they did roughly about 16 kata, and it was mainly the Shonen Ryu usual kata plus Sanshin, if I don't remember wrong. And this last year, when I was in Okinawa, we also visited one of the sons of one of the Ishikawas, who in his parents' home have a coffee shop these days up in Shuri. So while the son didn't train, we talked a little about his father, and he also showed him the Ishikawa Sai.
Oh.
So they have that in a coffee shop.
That is pretty cool.
So that is quite cool, and I suspect it's just a matter of time before that coffee shop will be included in the karate tours of Okinawa.
Yeah, that could be.
I think that was pretty much
Yeah.
what I have to say about that for now.
Okay.
Without looking in any papers.
Right. And then one of the other questions we got, I know, was asking about what makes Kishimoto-di technically distinct and different from modern karate. Modern karate could be defined in a lot of different ways. So the way that I'm kind of taking that question is being sort of the Itosu, introduction to school and on, especially styles that are like Shitoryu and Shotokan, but even some of the other Okinawan styles, Shorin-ryu and things like that are from his lineage that kind of got modified there in the early 1900s, and especially after World War II. I'm kind of assuming that's where they're going with that. So what makes Kishimoto-di kind of different and distinct from those?
Okay, so in one way, whatever ryu we compare with, we will find things that are same, things that are similar, and things that are different. And of course, I mean, I don't think you find that many applications that are unique, and we have Nahanshi, Pasai, and Kushanku. Even if we do them differently, it's not unique katas. We have a help kata called Nidabu, which is unique to us, but I think that because very few people, old people taught pretty young people, we have few generation in the lineage. While it probably changed with every person, it doesn't change so much. And there was still a quite close connection between the kata, the training method, and the applications. And that was what was appealing to me, and I think with many others. So if we talk about the karate, we partly have the school karate, And with an introduction to school karate, Kinyo Hiroshi wrote about it in his last book, From Tode to Karate, which was an interesting book. It's a little sad. It probably never will be translated because they probably don't want it translated. But he was talking about that technique was sanitized, and that was also simplified to teach in bigger groups. So sanitized means that techniques like fingers to the eyes maybe was lowered, so that instead of hitting the chest instead of the eyes or throat. And then probably they tried to simplify some parts, so it was easier to teach many people at the same time. And then you also have that probably so young people won't be bored. They started to teach the more kata, like instead of 1 nahanshi they taught 3 and 5 pinan, and so probably the amount of kata people trained was a little less before the school karate was started. And then of course later on in the 30s, 40s, people started to testing out methods to compete with it, and that probably also changed a lot of the material.
Just from my perspective, because I've gone from, one style to another and then started training in Kishimoto-di as well, I think the things that people really notice that are different, and apologies for the barking because the dogs are playing outside too, but the things that I've noticed that are especially different that people will tend to notice just kind of comparing the styles, watching them, is that Kishimoto-di is generally a lot softer than most of the karate that you see. A lot more relaxation in general, but also sort of softer movements, softer angles in comparison. And then a lot of different kind of body mechanics. So you've got the sinking and rising that happens that a lot of styles specifically prohibit. You're not supposed to change your head height. And then the twisting at the waist, not utilizing the hips. So those are kind of some of the differences that I've seen that are pretty evident from just a quick look at it. And apparently the dogs are having quite a fun time. So hopefully that's not terribly distracting for much longer. I do know that there was one other question that we got in advance. And feel free to add questions in the chat, and I'll go put the dogs away so they're less distracting. But if you put questions in the chat, we can take a look at those. And I know that somebody had asked how you could utilize or train Kishimoto-di for MMA or self-defense, that sort of a thing.
I mean, it doesn't really matter what kind of competition it is, if it's MMA or point sparring, whatever. You have to start from the rules and train after that, so I don't see really there's a direct connection that way. While we teach more Kishimoto from the perspective I want to save this material for another generation at least. If you talk it as pure self-defense, I think it's easy things to learn for self-defense than karate, to be honest. So that's one reason we don't promote for karate. But if you want to pressure test it, I think you should do. Learn the material and gradually let the opponent come at you stronger and faster. It's like most things. Let the skill develop, but start out slow and easy.
Yeah. And I would tend to agree in general that karate takes a long time. You can take some pieces of it and teach them quickly, and have people get, sort of an introduction to self-defense methods that can work relatively, quickly without a lot of training to get particularly good. But most systems are going to take a long time, and I would say Kishimoto-di has got a lot of nuance to it, so that makes it especially deep in a way to try and learn and figure out how to make it work. But it's also simple at the same time, which is interesting.
I usually say that Kishimoto is so simple it becomes difficult. because it's kind of easy to understand and also not that difficult to do, but still doesn't matter. It still might be difficult to get good at it, like anything.
So those were the kind of the big questions that we got in advance of the Q&A here. Give you guys some time if you want to type in some questions into the chat that we can see. Why did I start Kishimoto-di and stick with it? Just a few key points. So I saw Ulf post a video. When did you make that video with Kongi on the beach?
2011.
2011? And so somewhere along the line I found that video, and I thought it was interesting. And I think it may have been it would have been later, maybe like 2012, 2013 that we started talking about it. So I asked some questions because I had seen some things in the video that some of it made perfect sense and I thought was really cool. And I wanted to learn more about. And then there were a few things that I saw that I didn't quite understand how they were working, and I started asking him some kind of technical questions on it. And just kind of went from there, and I started trying to pick up the kata as best I could, the Tachimura no Nahanchi from a video, and kind of get a feel for that and ask questions, but it really came down to needing that in-person interaction. And so we worked out a trip for him to come to Phoenix and teach a seminar. And he stayed with me for about a week, stayed with my sensei for about a week.
In 14.
Yeah, in 2014. And he worked with us on mostly Nahanchi and Nidanbu.
Yes.
And taught a weekend seminar on that visit and went over not just the kind of technical points of performing the kata, but all of the application. Well, not all the application, but a lot of application that went with it. And to me, it was really interesting for a number of reasons. One being it's different, but related and similar. So the fact that it's kind of this other lineage going back that's related to the one that I was practicing, but didn't go through the same changes that almost all the other versions of Nahanchi, for example, went through. Gave me kind of this chance to look at this different perspective, this maybe older perspective, and see where things might have come from, which I thought was particularly cool. And I just kind of kept going with it because it's really interesting, and it's got a very distinct feel to it. So it feels different to do than most of the karate that you're used to. So it's also something that, in talking with Ulf and kind of getting involved with some of the other people who practice these kata throughout the world through social media, it's a very small...
You met Luis David this time?
Yeah, met Luis David. He's awesome. If you're in Mexico City, you'll definitely need to check out Luis David Munoz. But the impression that I got was it's a very small style, headquartered out of the Bugeikan on Okinawa, and maybe a few hundred people that practice the kata from there or more.
I don't know. No, it's not that many active now.
Yeah.
Over the years probably, but
yeah.
Not now.
So I mean, I got the impression that it's a very small.
It's still
group.
very rare. It's not as rare as when we started in 2011,
right.
but it's still rare.
Right.
So in 2010, when I learned Pasai, Sensei said that he taught about 5 people. So it was about 5 people knowing the kata by then. So it was on the verge of dying out, and that's kind of when we decided to go a little more public. Yeah. And since then we gradually become a little more known.
Yeah. And as the nerd that I am, history being interesting and comparison being really interesting to me, that was a big part of it, but the fact that it was kind of on the verge of dying out and that they were trying to keep it from dying out was something that I thought was a worthy cause too. I know of a lot of instances with different martial arts where the head of the style passes away and then a lot of things are lost, and That happened not that long ago with Taika Oyata and his organization. He had taught everything to Jim Logue, and then he passed away from cancer, and then before anyone else really, as far as I know, got caught up to that, Oyata himself passed away, and so a lot of information would have been lost from that. And those kind of things happening more and more as the current generation of masters from Okinawa and such get older, trying to keep that stuff from dying out, keeping it alive, and keeping it
and it also seems like the smaller arts, smaller material, have a bigger time. I was thinking about, for instance, Kishimoto-di, which I talked with both my sensei, Higa sensei, and the Bunbukan sensei, which is Nakamoto Masahiro, and they both learned a few of the kata from Kishimoto. It's only 3 kata. It's Nahanshi, Pasai, and Kuma no Sanshin. So they had done at least Nahanshi and Kuma Sanshin, but they forgot it. And I don't know if anyone knows it these days, so it might be that Kishimoto is lost. At least we can't find anyone on Okinawa who done it and remember it and do it actively. So yeah, it is actually a few rare styles that's either dying out or died out. So what's gone is gone, but you can always try the other ones.
Yeah, try and keep the ones that we still have around for as long as we can. Document them.
There you have the Shiroma lineage, for instance, which is quite an interesting. There is at least one school who still does it. Might be more.
All right. Well, with that, unless anybody has any other questions, I think we'll get signed off here fairly quickly. We've got, what are your thoughts on Kishimoto-di tendency to twist from the spine versus hip movements? Common in karate where it's more hip dominant. I assume that's probably for me because I've done both, but I'm not entirely sure.
So you have hip in of course you use hip as well. It's mainly Nahanshi where you learn to use twist in the waist, because that might be different. But
yeah,
your impressions are
and when you look at the fact that you're using a completely different stance from what most people do Naihanchi in, that inward turned feet, or even forward, but somewhere in that range usually, of foot orientation, you can really engage your hips rotationally with those stances. But in Shikodachi, you kind of can't really move your hips very much without just wobbling your legs everywhere. And then that's kind of key to a lot of the applications, is being in the right stance to get all these things to work. So you kind of can't start messing with the stance trying to use hips for power anyway, because then you lose the whole technique you're trying to do. The twisting at the waist, I would say for most people probably doesn't feel very strong, because they're used to driving off the ground into the hip, transferring everything, and it feels very explosive. And twisting at the waist doesn't feel very explosive, but when you're actually applying it the way that it's intended, and you're moving the body in, having Taigi Ichi as your goal of the body and technique at the same time, everything kind of fits together, and you hit hard enough for what you're trying to do when you're hitting. And then there's a lot of techniques that aren't hitting as well, that the twisting is just perfect for. So I think, although it's strange, and especially if you're transitioning between one style, trying to pick up Kishimoto-di, it's very difficult to get used to. For what it's specifically trying to do, it works out really, really well. So you just have to kind of understand that it is trying to do different things in different ways for different reasons, but it does have reasons, and the fact that you learn those reasons along with it helps. It's not one of those things where it's, why do I do it this way? Because sensei said so. It's not that kind of a system. It actually is one of those that has explanations for, you do the kata this way because it's doing this and teaching you to do this, and you're applying it this way, and it has, substance to it. So that's kind of the gist of that, my thoughts on that.
So about the feet, you have all variations from Ryu doing Shikodachi to Motobu Kempo and also Anashioshomo system that have feet parallel to slightly inward feet in some of the shorinri.
To some very inward feet. Ishinru does very, very dramatically inward turned feet. So that's just kind of a quick summary of it, though. I've actually written an article before on the stances of Naihanchi and kind of covered those three, and at least from my perspective, the way that they kind of affect what you can do in those stances, and how that affects what you can do in Naihanchi.
Yes. I mean, there are some technical differences that might be different. Like, we don't have any forward senkusu Dutch with gyakuski, for instance. That might feel different, not in any kata. That might be a little different from most styles. Any more things you think?
So far, I think that's it, unless anybody has any other questions. I can see that we've got one person who likes to ask the questions so far. We've got a couple people who've joined recently.
You're welcome to ask. You have the chance. We haven't repeated anything, so you you get what we come up with for the moment.
Hello to all the people who've stopped in now new. And of course, this will be available on Instagram for 24 hours anyway, so people can go back and look at it. And I'll try and post it up to YouTube later as well. I have my purple belt test in a week. I'd like to know if you guys have any tips when it comes to board breaks, because I've never done one of them before. I don't think that's really Kishimoto-di's thing, the board breaking, the Tameshiwari.
Shugumina did a break where he broke 35 tiles at an exhibition in the 50s.
Yeah.
Do we have any tip now? Strike through? No, not really.
Yeah.
Gradually training and strike through.
Yeah, building up to it.
But of course, some hand conditioning might be in order for learning to strike people as well. But,
yeah, it helps.
But yeah, boards are not people.
Boards are not people. They are fun to break, though. I've done a good amount of breaking, not competitively or anything like that, but it's a fun little hobby to do once you've worked up some conditioning. But
I know one of my title sensei broke ice.
Yeah. It's mostly just a matter of not being scared of the thing you're hitting and striking all the way through it and not stopping anywhere in the middle, because then you just hurt your hand. So yeah, basically hand conditioning and not being afraid. So that's kind of it. It's like I said, a little out of the wheelhouse for the subject, but you can throw that in there. Trust yourself, yeah. So if there's any other questions from anybody before we close out for the evening, give them a little bit of time to type something maybe. Like I said, I do usually try and put these on YouTube. The questions from the feed there, unfortunately, don't come across on YouTube, but we're reading them out, so that should be relatively helpful. Still giving some advice for the person in the chat, looks like.
Yeah, sure.
So I would say with that then, we'll close out for the evening. You guys can always send messages to me here on Instagram if you have more questions or things like that. We have a Kishimoto-di page on Facebook that you can send messages to, and we can get in touch with you that way. And do I plan on one day teaching Kishimoto-di and love the Naihanchi katas? Personally loves doing Naihanchi Shodan. Awesome. And as far as one day teaching Kishimoto-di, I mean, I've taught some Kishimoto-di already. I mean, I've done a couple of seminars teaching just Naihanchi, the first kata, and some application for it. And even when I wasn't specifically teaching Kishimoto-di, I would definitely teach things that came from it. So
you're welcome to reach out to Noah if he's easier to reach here in the USA.
Yeah, Sweden might be the time difference makes things a little difficult. So. But yeah, you can feel free to send me messages here, send me messages through Facebook as well, and through the Kishimoto-di
So
page.
even if Kishimoto-di is a small art, we have people in US and in Canada and in Mexico and in Australia and there's some places in Europe as well, of course. So
yeah,
but for here in US, reach out to Noah if you have any questions.
Yeah, I'll do my best to not screw it up. in the process. But and of course, if there's anything that you ask that I don't know the answer to, I'll just ask it. So I'll not be giving you, fake answers or anything like that. But with that, I really appreciate everybody who tuned in, asked questions, sent questions in advance. And if you aren't watching this live, I hope that this is beneficial for you later on.
Thank you.